Bonnie stood in James Vincent's corner office at midnight, rain-soaked and trembling, the keycard still clutched in her fingers. 6 months ago, she'd walked out of this office and his life. Tonight, she'd come back to tell him the truth she'd been too afraid to speak. Hey family, welcome to Mr. Vincent Stories. If you're new here, we explore relationship psychology through narrative fiction, examining attachment theory, emotional intelligence, and the complex dynamics of adult partnerships. Make sure you're subscribed, tap that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments about your own experiences with workplace boundaries and second chances. Let's get into it. James hadn't heard from Bonnie Williams in exactly 183 days, not since that night when she'd stood in this same office, her voice shaking with barely controlled emotion, telling him she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't work for him, couldn't pretend she didn't feel what was happening between them, couldn't stay and watch everything she'd built, her reputation, her credibility, her carefully constructed professional identity, get destroyed by rumors and whispers about the ambitious project manager who'd gotten too close to the CEO. He'd counted every single one of those 183 days. The merger announcement had been the breaking point. 2 years of late-night strategizing together, 2 years of carefully maintained professional boundaries that felt increasingly artificial. 2 years of unspoken feelings growing stronger with every meeting, every shared success. Every moment their eyes met across a conference table, and they both had to look away before anyone noticed. And then the board had suggested she lead the integration team, reporting directly to him on the most high-profile project in the company's history. The optics were impossible, the conflict of interest undeniable, the potential for disaster overwhelming. James had seen the panic in her eyes during that board meeting, even though her professional mask never slipped. He'd watched her sit perfectly still, taking notes like this was just another assignment, while her knuckles went white around her pen. After the meeting, she'd stayed behind, waiting until the room cleared before turning to face him. "I can't do this," she'd said quietly. "The project?" he'd asked, though he'd known that wasn't what she meant. "Any of it. I can't lead this integration while reporting to you. I can't pretend anymore that what's happening between us is just professional respect. I can't watch people start to question whether my promotions, my successes, my entire career has been based on anything other than my work." Her voice had broken slightly on the last word. "I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much. I won't let anyone reduce me to just another woman who slept with her boss." The words had hit James like a physical blow, even though they'd never crossed that line. Never touched beyond professional handshakes, never spent time together outside the office, never done anything that could be construed as inappropriate. But the feelings, those had been inappropriate for months. Maybe years. "Bonnie," he'd started, but she'd held up a hand. "I'm resigning," she'd said, her voice steadier now, more determined. "I've already accepted a position in Singapore, VP of Strategy for Meridian Group. It's a good opportunity, better than good. It's everything I've been working toward." "Everything except what you really want," James had said quietly. And they'd both known he wasn't just talking about career advancement. She'd looked at him then, really looked at him, and he'd seen everything she was feeling written across her face, longing and regret and resignation and fear. "Sometimes what we want isn't what's best for us," she'd whispered. "Sometimes we have to choose the smart path instead of the easy one." "Being with me would be the easy path?" James had asked, and despite everything, there'd been a hint of a smile on his lips. "No," Bonnie had admitted. "Being with you would be the hardest thing I've ever done. That's why I have to leave before I'm tempted to try." That had been 183 days ago. She'd worked her 2 weeks' notice with perfect professionalism, transitioning her projects, training her replacement, maintaining friendly but distant interactions with everyone, including him. Her last day, she'd stopped by his office to drop off her keycard and laptop. "Good luck in Singapore," James had said, standing behind his desk like it was a shield against everything he wanted to say. "Thank you. Good luck with the merger." She'd paused in the doorway, her hand on the frame. "James, don't," he'd said, more sharply than he'd intended. "Don't say something that's going to make this harder." She'd nodded, understanding. Take care of yourself. And then she'd walked away, and he'd let her go because it was the right thing to do, the professional thing, the ethical thing, even if it felt like tearing his own heart out. Now she was back, standing in his office with rain dripping from her coat onto his marble floor, her dark eyes searching his face for something he didn't know how to name. James looked up from his laptop, his breath catching at the sight of her. She looked different. Her hair was longer, styled in soft natural curls instead of her usual professional bun. She'd lost weight, he noticed with concern, her cheekbones more pronounced than he remembered. But her eyes were the same. Intelligent, determined, and currently filled with something that looked like desperation. Bonnie. Her name came out rougher than he intended. Like gravel and longing and 6 months of missing her compressed into 3 syllables. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved slowly into the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that brought back 1,000 memories. Late nights, reviewing presentations. Early mornings, strategizing over coffee. The sound of her pacing while she thought through complex problems out loud. The city lights from the 42nd floor cast shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she shrugged off her wet coat. "The Singapore offer was everything I thought I wanted," she said finally. Her voice quiet but steady in that way he remembered. The tone she used when she was trying to convince herself of something she didn't quite believe. 6 figures, corner office, complete autonomy. My own team, my own projects, my own rules. No one questioning my judgment or my competence or whether I earned my position. James pushed his chair back from his desk slowly, deliberately, creating distance even as everything in him wanted to close the space between them. His steel blue eyes searched her face, looking for answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. "Then why are you here instead of celebrating your success?" Bonnie stopped a few feet from his desk, maintaining that careful professional distance they'd perfected over 2 years of working together. Even now, even after everything, old habits died hard. "Because I realized something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper now, her professional mask beginning to crack. "I realized that running away from something doesn't make it disappear. It just makes you lonely in a different time zone." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and months of unspoken truth. 6 months, James said, and his voice was tight with emotion he'd been holding back for half a year. 6 months, Bonnie, no calls, no emails, no explanation beyond a resignation letter that said you'd accepted another opportunity and wished the company continued success. "I know." Her hands twisted together, the only visible sign of her nervousness. Everything else about her posture was composed, professional, controlled, except for her eyes, which betrayed everything. "No, I handled it wrong. I know I should have..." "Should have what?" He stood abruptly, unable to stay seated anymore, unable to maintain the pretense of calm. "Should have told me you were leaving before I heard it through HR? Should have given me a chance to..." He stopped himself, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration she knew well. "To what?" "We both knew there was no good option here. That's exactly why I left," Bonnie said, and now her voice did break, just slightly, just enough that he could hear the pain underneath. "Because staying meant choosing between my career and whatever this was between us, and I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let anyone say I'd slept my way to the top." The blunt words made James flinch. "No one would have said that. You know they would have." She moved closer, just 1 step, her professional armor cracking further. The ambitious black woman who got promoted while dating the CEO? Come on, James. We both know exactly what they would have said, what they would have assumed, how every achievement in my career would have been reframed through the lens of our relationship. He couldn't argue with that. The board, the shareholders, the media, they would have destroyed her credibility, questioned every achievement, reduced everything she'd accomplished to a romantic entanglement with her boss. Even if they'd done everything properly, even if they'd disclosed the relationship and navigated every ethical landmine, her reputation would have suffered in ways his never would have. "So you chose Singapore," he said quietly, and there was no accusation in his voice, just a statement of fact. "I chose to protect my career," she corrected, meeting his eyes with steady determination. "I chose to protect both our careers. I chose to leave before we crossed a line that would change how people saw us, saw me, forever. But I didn't choose to stop." She trailed off, looking away, her composure finally beginning to crumble. "Stop what?" James asked, even though he was afraid of the answer. Even though he'd spent 6 months trying not to think about this exact conversation. Bonnie met his eyes again, and he saw raw vulnerability there, something she never showed at work, something he'd only glimpsed in their most unguarded moments during those late-night strategy sessions when exhaustion and proximity had worn down their defenses. "Stop loving you." The confession hit James like a physical blow. His breath left his lungs in a rush, and he had to grip the edge of his desk to steady himself. For 6 months, he'd tried to convince himself that what they'd felt was just proximity, just the intensity of working together on high-stakes projects, just the natural attraction between two intelligent people who respected each other professionally. He'd told himself that with distance and time it would fade into a pleasant memory of what might have been. But it hadn't faded. Not for him, not even close, and apparently not for her either. "Bonnie," he started, but she held up a hand. That same gesture she'd used 6 months ago when she told him goodbye. "Let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath, and he could see her gathering courage. "I thought if I put enough distance between us, literally halfway around the world, I could convince myself it was just a crush. Just inappropriate feelings for my boss that would disappear once I had a new job, a new city, a new life. But Singapore was—" She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just exhaustion and defeat. "Beautiful, exciting, everything I thought I wanted, and completely, utterly empty without you." James felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd been keeping carefully sealed for 183 days. "Then why did you stay so long? Why didn't you call?" "Because I was terrified," she admitted, and now the vulnerability in her voice was unmistakable. "Terrified that if I came back, if I told you how I felt, you'd either reject me, which would destroy me, or you'd feel the same way, which would complicate everything all over again. Your company, my career, our reputations, the ethics we'd both worked so hard to maintain. I convinced myself that loving you from a distance was better than risking everything." "What changed?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Bonnie smiled sadly, and in that expression he saw every lonely night, every moment of doubt, every time she'd almost called and stopped herself. "I went to a networking event last week. Met someone, handsome, successful, perfect on paper. Harvard MBA, founded his own firm, spoke 3 languages. Everything I should have wanted in a partner. We talked about business, about the industry, about career goals and market trends and strategic opportunities. All the right topics, all the safe conversations." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was raw with honesty. "And all I could think was that his voice was wrong, his laugh was wrong, the way he looked at me was wrong. He was interested in my resume, my accomplishments, my career trajectory. But you were always interested in my ideas, my perspective, the way I thought through problems. You challenged me, you made me better, and I realized I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who wasn't you." James felt his hands clench and unclench at his sides, every professional instinct screaming at him to step back, to remind her of all the reasons this couldn't work, to protect them both from the complications this would create. But his heart had been in Singapore for 6 months, and now it was standing right in front of him, asking for a second chance. She moved closer, finally closing the distance between them until she was standing just close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, could smell the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with rain. Not touching, but close enough that the air between them felt electric. "I'm tired of pretending," she said, her voice steady now with conviction. "I'm tired of choosing my career over my heart. I'm tired of being practical and smart and professional when all I want is to be honest about what I feel for you. So here's the truth, James Vincent. I love you. I've loved you for 2 years, and I don't know how to make that fit with everything else in my life, but I had to tell you. I had to give us a chance before I spent the rest of my life wondering, what if?" James closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the emotion crashing through him like a wave. When he opened them again, Bonnie was watching him with a mixture of hope and fear that made his chest ache. "I need you to understand something," he said carefully, his voice rougher than usual with the weight of what he was about to say. "If we do this, if we try to make this work, everything changes. There's no going back to being just former colleagues who used to work together. There's no pretending it didn't happen if things get complicated." "I know," she said simply. "There will be questions, gossip. People will make assumptions about our working relationship, about why I promoted you, about whether anything inappropriate happened while you worked here." He was being deliberately harsh, needing her to understand the full scope of what she was asking for. "Some people will never believe there was nothing between us back then. They'll rewrite history to fit their assumptions." "Let them," Bonnie said, and there was steel in her voice now. The same strength he'd seen her display in countless boardrooms when facing down challenges. "I'm not your employee anymore. I don't work for your company. There's no conflict of interest, no ethics violation, no HR policy we're breaking. Just 2 people who've been in love for 2 years, finally admitting it." "2 years?" James asked, caught by the specific timeline. Bonnie nodded, and a ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Since that strategy meeting where you challenged my entire approach to the Morrison proposal. Do you remember?" "I remember." How could he forget? It had been late, almost 9 at night, and most of the office had gone home. She'd presented her plan for their largest potential client with such confidence, such brilliant reasoning. And he'd pushed back, hard, playing devil's advocate because he knew the client would do the same. "You tore apart my analysis for an hour," Bonnie said, her voice softer now with the memory. "And I was furious. I thought you were being deliberately difficult, trying to undermine me. But then you stopped and said, 'Now rebuild it. Take everything I just said and make your argument stronger.'" "You stayed until midnight," James said, remembering how she'd sat across from him, laptop open, reworking every slide, every data point, every assumption. "You didn't leave until it was perfect." "We didn't leave until it was perfect," she corrected. "You stayed with me, ordered dinner, helped me think through every weakness in my approach. You treated me like an equal, like a partner, not like a subordinate whose work you are critiquing. You made me better at my job. And somewhere around 11 p.m. when we were debating the financial projections and you actually laughed at one of my counter-arguments, I realized I was in serious trouble." James felt his heart hammering in his chest. "I remember that laugh. You'd just proven that my concerns about market saturation were based on outdated data. You had this look on your face, triumphant and brilliant and so beautiful I forgot what I was saying. You went quiet for a full 30 seconds. Bonnie said, and now she was smiling genuinely. "I thought I'd offended you." "You terrified me," he admitted, "because I realized that if I wasn't careful, I was going to fall in love with you, and that was the last thing either of us needed." "Too late," Bonnie whispered, "for both of us." They stood there in the quiet office, the rain pattering against the windows, the city lights creating shadows that danced across the walls. 2 years of restraint, 6 months of separation, and all of it had led to this moment. "I tried to forget you," James said, his voice rough with honesty. "I told myself it was for the best when you left, that you deserved a career without complications, without people questioning your competence because of who you were dating. I convinced myself I was fine, that I could focus on the company, on the merger, on all the things that should have mattered most." "Were you?" Bonnie asked softly. "Fine? No." The word came out like a confession. "I was miserable. Every morning I'd walk past your empty office and remember how we used to debate over coffee before anyone else arrived. Every late meeting, I'd look for you in the conference room out of habit. Every success felt hollow because you weren't there to share it with me." Bonnie's breath caught. "James." "I tried to move on," he continued, needing her to understand the full scope of what she'd meant to him, what she still meant. 3 different dates in 6 months. Sarah from the board introduced me to her friend. Another CEO, brilliant, accomplished, beautiful. We went to dinner at that French place downtown, had a perfectly pleasant conversation about market trends and economic forecasts. And all I could think was that she wasn't you. What happened? I made an excuse before dessert and went home, sat in my apartment and stared at my phone for 2 hours, trying to decide if calling you would be selfish or honest. He ran his hand through his hair again, that gesture of frustration she knew so well. I convinced myself not to call, told myself I was respecting your choice, giving you space to build your new life. "I wish you had called," Bonnie said quietly. "I was doing the same thing in Singapore, staring at my phone, drafting messages I never sent, trying to convince myself that moving on was the mature choice." "Why didn't you?" James asked. "Because I was afraid you'd moved on, that you'd decided I was right about leaving, that the complication wasn't worth it, or worse, that you'd never felt what I felt, and I'd just been projecting my own feelings onto professional respect and friendship." James took a step closer, close enough now that he could have reached out and touched her if he'd wanted to. And God, he wanted to. "You weren't projecting anything. Every feeling you had, I had too. Every late night we worked together, I had to remind myself not to touch you. Every time you solved a problem or made a brilliant observation, I fell a little more in love with you. Then why didn't you say something?" Her voice was barely audible now. "Because I was your boss, because you deserved to build your career without that complication. Because I respected you too much to put you in that position." He paused, his eyes locked on hers. "Because I was a coward who convinced himself that professional ethics were more important than personal happiness." "You weren't a coward," Bonnie said firmly. "You were protecting me, protecting both of us. I understand that now." "And now?" James asked, his heart in his throat. "What happens now, Bonnie?" She reached up, her hand hovering near his face, but not quite touching. "Now we stop protecting ourselves from what we both want. Now we stop letting other people's opinions dictate our choices. Now we take a risk on something real." "What if I told you that you won't have to choose?" James asked, his voice low and intense. "What if I told you we'll figure out a way to make this work that protects both our careers?" "How?" The question was barely audible, and he could hear the hope and fear warring in that single word. "Different companies, different departments, proper disclosure and ethical boundaries, whatever it takes." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone gently. "I'll call the board tomorrow morning. I'll recuse myself from any decisions involving you or your company. We'll do this properly, above board, no shortcuts. But I'm not losing you again, Bonnie. Not when I just got you back. You promise?" She looked up at him with those dark eyes that had haunted his dreams for months. "Promise we'll fight for this, even when it gets complicated. Even when people talk. Even when it would be easier to walk away." "I promise," James said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I promise that whatever happens, we face it together. No more running, no more pretending, no more choosing the safe path when what we really want is each other. Bonnie's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling now, really smiling, in a way he hadn't seen in years. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it scares me." "Don't be scared," James said, pulling her closer, his other hand coming up to frame her face. "Love me. Just love me. Let me love you back the way I should have been doing for the past 2 years." And then he kissed her. It was everything 2 years of waiting should be. Gentle but desperate, sweet but intense, a promise and a homecoming all at once. James's hands cradled her face like she was something precious and irreplaceable, and Bonnie's fingers fisted in his shirt, holding him close as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. When his lips met hers, 6 months of silence shattered like glass. She tasted like hope and second chances and coffee from earlier in the evening, like everything he'd been missing without knowing how to name it. The kiss deepened naturally, and every word they'd never said passed between them in that moment. Every lonely night, every missed opportunity, every time they'd almost reached for each other and pulled back at the last second. Bonnie made a soft sound against his mouth, something between a sigh and a sob of relief, and James pulled her closer, one arm wrapping around her waist, needing to feel her real and solid in his arms. Her hands moved from his shirt to his shoulders, to his neck, her fingers threading through his hair as she kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring 2 years of restrained feelings into this single, perfect moment. The city lights blurred around them. The rain against the windows faded to white noise. The office that had been their battleground, their torture chamber of unspoken desire, became their sanctuary. Everything disappeared except this: the taste of her lips, the warmth of her body against his, the rightness of finally giving in to what they'd both wanted for so long. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, just feeling her presence, her warmth, the reality of her in his arms. "I love you too," he whispered against her lips. "I should have said it 2 years ago. I should have said it before you left. I should have called you in Singapore and told you every single day. I love you, Bonnie Williams. I think I've loved you from the moment you walked into my office for your interview and challenged my entire business model in the first 5 minutes." Bonnie laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "I was so nervous that day. I almost didn't come to the interview because I'd researched you and knew you had a reputation for being impossible to impress." "You impressed me in the first 30 seconds, James admitted, pulling back slightly so he could look at her properly. "You sat down, looked me in the eye, and said, 'I read your last quarterly report. Your market analysis is solid, but your expansion strategy is going to hit regulatory barriers in 3 key markets.' Here's how I'd approach it differently. No small talk, no trying to butter me up, just straight to the analysis." "You laughed," Bonnie remembered, her hands still resting on his shoulders, like she couldn't quite believe she was allowed to touch him. "I thought I'd blown the interview. I laughed because you were right, and because I'd never had an interviewee call out my strategy in the first 2 minutes. I knew right then that you were going to be dangerous to my peace of mind." "Dangerous how?" "Because you were brilliant and challenging, and you looked at me like I was someone worth impressing, not just someone to please or manage. You made me want to be better at my job, better at strategy, better at everything." He paused, his thumb tracing her jawline. "You made me want to be the kind of man who deserved someone like you." "You are that man," Bonnie said softly. "You always have been." They stood in the quiet office for a long moment, just holding each other, both afraid that if they let go, the moment would shatter and they'd wake up to find it had all been a dream. Finally, James pulled back, his hands still on her waist. "Come home with me," he said. "We need to talk properly, about what this means, about how we make this work, about everything." Bonnie nodded, and together they gathered their things. Her coat, his laptop, the remnants of their professional lives that would need to be carefully separated from their personal one. The drive to his apartment was quiet. Both of them lost in thought, but their hands remained linked across the center console. Fingers intertwined. James's penthouse was exactly as Bonnie had sometimes imagined it during those late nights in Singapore when she couldn't sleep. Sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline, but lived in and comfortable. Books scattered on the coffee table, a half-finished crossword puzzle, a coffee mug abandoned on the kitchen counter from that morning. "It's beautiful," she said, moving through the space, touching things, making herself at home in a way that felt both natural and terrifying. "Very you." "You sound surprised," James said, hanging up their coats and watching her explore his space with an intensity that made his chest tight. "I am, a little. I expected something more sterile. More like your office, all polished surfaces and no personality." She picked up a framed photo from his bookshelf. James at what looked like a company retreat, laughing at something off camera, looking younger and more carefree than she'd ever seen him at work. "You hide this side of yourself." "I have too," he said, moving to stand behind her, his hands settling on her waist. "Can't let the board see that their CEO is human. Can't let them know I have vulnerabilities." Bonnie turned in his arms, the photo still in her hand. "Is that what I am? A vulnerability?" "The biggest one I've ever had," he admitted without hesitation. "From the first day you walked into my office for that interview, you've been my Achilles heel. The thing that could make me question everything I thought I knew about myself." She set the photo down carefully and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Tell me about that day. Tell me what you really thought when you first saw me." James's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer. "I thought you were beautiful. That was the first thing, just pure aesthetic appreciation. You walked in wearing this navy suit that was perfectly professional, but somehow still made you stand out. Your hair was in that sleek bun you always wore. You shook my hand with this firm, confident grip, and met my eyes without flinching. And then," she prompted, smiling at the memory, "and then you started talking, and I thought you might be the most intelligent person I'd ever interviewed. You'd done your research, not just on the company, but on me, on the board, on our competitors, on market trends. You had opinions, strong ones, backed up with data. You challenged me, and I knew right then that you were going to be trouble." "Why trouble?" "Because I knew you were going to make me want things I couldn't have," James said, his voice dropping lower. "I knew you were going to make me question boundaries I'd never questioned before. I knew you were going to ruin me for anyone else." "Did I?" Bonnie asked, though her voice was soft, vulnerable. "Ruin you for anyone else?" "Completely," he confirmed. "There were exactly 3 dates in 2 years. 3 attempts to prove to myself that I could be attracted to someone who wasn't you. And I spent every single one of them thinking about you, comparing them to you, wishing they were you." "Only 3, she teased gently. "Only 3. What about you? How many Singapore men tried to take you to dinner?" Bonnie's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "More than 3. My colleagues set me up constantly. You're new in town. You need to meet people. Here's a friend who'd love to take you out." I went on probably a dozen dates in 6 months. James's hands tightened slightly on her waist, a flash of something that looked like jealousy crossing his face before he could hide it. "None of them got a second date," Bonnie said quickly, seeing his reaction. "None of them made me laugh the way you do. None of them challenged me intellectually. None of them looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. None of them were you." "Good," he said, more possessively than he probably intended. "I don't like the idea of other men trying to—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I have no right to be jealous." "Yes, you do," Bonnie said firmly. Because I was yours even when I was trying to convince myself I wasn't. Every date, every attempted flirtation, every moment someone showed interest, I was yours. My heart was here, in this city, with you. James pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I need you to understand what you're signing up for here. My life is complicated. The company requires constant attention. The board can be demanding. There will be late nights and last-minute trips and times when work has to come first. I know, Bonnie said. I worked for you for 2 years, remember? I saw what your schedule was like. I was often part of those late nights and last-minute trips. It's different when it's your partner instead of your employee, James said seriously. I don't want you to feel neglected or like you're competing with my work for my attention. Bonnie pulled back to look at him directly. James, I'm not some delicate flower who needs constant attention. I'm building my own company. I have my own demanding career, my own late nights, my own obligations. What I need is a partner who understands that, who respects that my work is as important as yours, who doesn't expect me to sacrifice my ambitions for our relationship. I would never ask you to do that, James said immediately. I know. That's why I'm here. She cupped his face in her hands. I need you to understand something too. I'm not going to be the kind of girlfriend who shows up at your office unexpected or calls you in the middle of board meetings. I respect boundaries, professional ones, personal ones. But I also need honesty. If work is overwhelming, tell me. If you need space, tell me. If you're struggling with something, let me help instead of shutting me out. I'm not good at asking for help, James admitted. I know. You were a terrible patient when you had that flu 2 years ago. Worked from your apartment for 3 days straight instead of actually resting. You sent me soup, he remembered suddenly. Chicken noodle soup from that place downtown that I mentioned liking once in passing. You remembered that? Bonnie asked, surprised. I remember everything about you, James said simply. The soup. The fact that you prefer your coffee with exactly 2 sugars, no cream, that you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating, that you pace when you're thinking through a problem, that you take your shoes off under the conference table during long meetings, that you always have a backup plan and a backup for the backup plan. Bonnie felt tears pricking her eyes. You noticed all that. I noticed everything, he said softly. For 2 years, I noticed everything about you while trying to pretend I didn't. It was exhausting. Tell me about it, Bonnie said with a watery laugh. I had a running document on my laptop of all the little things I learned about you. Your coffee order, the fact that you run your hand through your hair when you're frustrated, that you loosen your tie during afternoon meetings, that you have this tiny scar above your left eyebrow that you got playing basketball in college, that you're left-handed but use your mouse with your right hand because your first boss told you it would make you more ambidextrous in your thinking. James stared at her. You kept a document. I told myself it was professional development, learning my boss's preferences to be a better employee. But really, I was just documenting you, learning everything I could because I couldn't have you, but I could at least know you. Can I see it? James asked, something soft and wondering in his voice. It's on my laptop, in a folder labeled Conference Notes, because I was paranoid someone might find it. She paused. It's 67 pages long. 67, James broke off, overwhelmed. Bonnie, I know, it's probably creepy. I should have deleted it when I left, but I couldn't. It felt like deleting you, and I wasn't ready to do that. James kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into it, gratitude and wonder and love and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, I want to read every single page. I want to know what you noticed, what you thought, what you felt during all those months we were pretending we were just colleagues. It might be embarrassing, Bonnie warned. I don't care. I want to know everything. They moved to his couch, settling in together with her laptop open between them. And there it was, a document titled Conference Notes, JV with entry after entry of observations and thoughts and feelings spanning 2 years. March 15th. He brought coffee to the strategy meeting without being asked. Remembered my preference even though I've only mentioned it once. Makes me feel seen in a way that's both comforting and terrifying. April 3rd. Defended my proposal to the board today, even though he'd privately expressed concerns to me yesterday. Showed me that disagreement in private doesn't mean lack of support in public. This is what partnership looks like. June 12th. Late night working on the Morrison project. He ordered Thai food without asking because he remembered I mentioned craving it last week. These small gestures of care are going to be my undoing. August 22nd. Board meeting today where someone questioned my data analysis. He didn't jump in to defend me. Let me handle it myself, but I saw his jaw tighten. He trusts me to fight my own battles, but hates seeing anyone question my competence. The restraint that requires is incredibly attractive. October 7th. Realized today that I'm in love with him. He was presenting the quarterly results, and halfway through he made a joke that only I would get. Something referencing a conversation we'd had weeks ago. He glanced at me while he said it, just for a second, and smiled. That's when I knew. I'm completely, hopelessly in love with my boss, and this is going to end badly. James read through entry after entry, his hand finding hers, fingers intertwining. Some entries made him smile. Some made his chest ache. All of them revealed a depth of attention and care that matched his own hidden feelings. This one, he said, pointing to the October entry. This was the quarterly meeting where I made that stupid dad joke about market penetration. It wasn't stupid, Bonnie said. It was funny because it referenced our argument about terminology from that late-night session. You laughed, James remembered. You were the only one who laughed, and everyone else looked confused, and I didn't care because you got it. You always got me. I still do, Bonnie said softly. That's what I realized in Singapore. All those dates, all those attempts to move on. None of them got me the way you do. None of them spoke my language. James closed the laptop carefully and set it aside, turning to face her fully. I don't want to waste any more time, Bonnie. I don't want to spend another day pretending this isn't what I want more than anything. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow morning, I'm calling the board. I'm going to tell them about us, about how we met, about the timeline. I'm going to recuse myself from any professional interactions with you or any company you're affiliated with. And then I'm going to take you on a proper date. Dinner, conversation, no laptops or spreadsheets allowed. Bonnie smiled. I'd like that. And then, James continued, his voice becoming more serious, I'm going to court you properly, the way I should have done from the beginning if circumstances had been different. I'm going to learn all the things I don't know yet. Your favorite flowers, your comfort movies, what you like to do on lazy Sunday mornings. I'm going to meet your friends and family. I'm going to build a life with you. That sounds perfect, Bonnie whispered. But I need you to promise me something, James said, taking both her hands in his. Promise me that if this gets hard, if the gossip gets to be too much, if people start questioning your competence because of our relationship, if you start to regret this choice, you'll talk to me instead of running away again. I promise, Bonnie said immediately. No more running. From now on, we face things together. Together, James agreed. Then he kissed her again, sealing the promise. They talked for hours that night, curled up together on his couch, making up for 6 months of silence and 2 years of restraint. They talked about their childhoods, their families, their dreams and fears. They talked about the practical aspects of their relationship, how to maintain boundaries, how to handle questions from colleagues, how to navigate the professional complications. My mother is going to have opinions, James warned at one point. She's going to want to meet you immediately and start planning our wedding before our second date. I can handle your mother, Bonnie said confidently. I negotiated with your board for 2 years. How much scarier can one woman be? James laughed. You'll see. But fair warning, she's been pestering me about settling down since I turned 40. When she finds out I've been in love with someone for 2 years and didn't tell her, I'm going to be in serious trouble. When do I get to meet her? Is next Sunday too soon? James asked, only half joking. Next Sunday is perfect, Bonnie said, and he could hear the nerves beneath her confidence. What about your friends? Do they know about me? Marcus knows, my college roommate. I had to tell someone or I was going to lose my mind. He's been telling me for 6 months that I should call you. Why didn't you? Because I thought I was doing the noble thing, letting you build your life without complications? James shook his head at his own reasoning. Turns out I was just being a coward. Not a coward, Bonnie corrected. Just careful. We both were. Too careful, maybe. What about you? Did you tell anyone? Bonnie nodded. My best friend Riley. She's the one who finally told me to stop being an idiot and come back. She said that in 20 years I wouldn't regret taking a risk on love, but I would regret playing it safe and wondering what might have been. I like Riley, James said. She sounds wise. She's going to love you, Bonnie said. She's already heard every detail about you for the past 2 years. She knows about the coffee preferences and the hair thing and the fact that you're left-handed. She knew about the document? She helped me realize it was a journal, not professional notes. Bonnie smiled. She was the one who pointed out that normal employees don't keep 67 pages of observations about their boss. As the night wore on and exhaustion began to set in, they finally acknowledged that Bonnie should probably go home, to her apartment where she'd stayed since arriving back in the city. Or, James said carefully, you could stay here, in the guest room, he added quickly. I'm not assuming anything, I'm not ready to say goodnight yet. Bonnie looked at him for a long moment, reading the vulnerability in his eyes. I'd like to stay, she said. But James, I need you to know that I'm not ready we just got back together. I want to take this slow. I understand, James said immediately. Bonnie, I've waited 2 years for you. I can wait as long as you need. This isn't about rushing into anything physical. This is about building something real, something that lasts. Relief flooded her features. Thank you. There's already going to be enough speculation about us. I don't want to move too fast and wonder later if we built this on the right foundation. We'll take it at whatever pace feels right to you, James assured her. No pressure, no expectations, just us figuring this out together. He showed her to the guest room, providing her with fresh towels and one of his t-shirts to sleep in. At the doorway, he paused, his hand on the frame. Bonnie, thank you for coming back, for being brave enough to tell me the truth, for giving us this chance. Thank you for not turning me away, she replied, for loving me back, for being willing to fight for this. He wanted to kiss her goodnight, but something in her eyes told him she needed space, needed time to process everything that had happened. So instead, he squeezed her hand gently and said, Good night. Shout if you need anything. Good night, James. He lay awake in his own room for hours, staring at the ceiling, hardly able to believe that she was there, just down the hall, that this was real. After 6 months of missing her, 6 months of trying to convince himself he was fine, she was back. And this time, he wasn't going to let fear or professional concerns or anything else get in the way. Morning came too early, and not early enough. James woke to the smell of coffee brewing and found Bonnie in his kitchen, still wearing his t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, looking more beautiful than anyone had a right to look at 7 in the morning. Good morning, she said, smiling at him over her coffee mug. I hope you don't mind. I raided your kitchen. Mind? I'm just trying to process that this is real, that you're here in my kitchen making coffee. Bonnie set down her mug and moved toward him, wrapping her arms around his waist. It's real. I'm here. And unless you've changed your mind overnight—" "Never," James interrupted, his arms coming around her. "I could never change my mind about you." They stood like that for a while, just holding each other in the morning light before the reality of the day ahead intruded. "I need to make that call to the board," James said reluctantly. "And I need to go home and change," Bonnie said. "But tonight, that proper date you promised?" "Absolutely. I'll pick you up at 7. "Perfect." As Bonnie gathered her things to leave, James caught her hand. "I love you," he said, needing her to hear it in the daylight, in the real world, when they were both clear-headed and certain. "I love you too," Bonnie replied, standing on her toes to kiss him gently. "See you tonight." After she left, James made the call he'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The board chairman answered on the second ring. "Robert, it's James. I need to discuss something with you. It's personal, but it has professional implications." The conversation was difficult but necessary. James explained his relationship with Bonnie, emphasized that nothing inappropriate had happened while she worked for him, outlined his plan to recuse himself from any professional dealings with her or her company. Robert listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and finally sighed. "James, I appreciate your transparency. Frankly, half the board suspected something between you 2 years ago. The way you looked at each other in meetings wasn't exactly subtle." James felt his face heat. "It was that obvious?" "To those of us who've been in love ourselves, yes. But to your credit, neither of you ever acted on it, which speaks to your professionalism." Robert paused. "Here's what's going to happen. You'll send a formal disclosure to the board. We'll note it in the records, and as long as you maintain the boundaries you've outlined, there shouldn't be an issue." "Off the record? I'm happy for you. Martha and I have been married 37 years, and I can't imagine doing this job without her support. You deserve that too." The relief James felt was overwhelming. "Thank you, Robert. One more thing. When you make this public, and you will have to at some point, be prepared for questions. From the media, from shareholders, from people who want to make assumptions about the past. You'll need a unified message." "We'll handle it," James said confidently. "Together." After hanging up, James sat in his office, staring out at the city skyline, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of stress or challenges, but the deep certainty that he was finally on the right path, with the right person, building something real. His phone buzzed with a text from Bonnie. "Survived the board call?" "Better than expected. They actually seemed happy for me. For us. Good. Because I just told Riley we're official, and she screamed so loud I think my neighbors heard." James smiled, typing back. "Can't wait for tonight. Where should I make reservations?" "Surprise me, but nowhere too fancy. I want to actually talk to you, not perform for other diners." "Done. 7 o'clock. Wear something comfortable." It's a date. And it was. The first of many. 6 months later, James stood in a different conference room, not his own but Bonnie's. Her startup had officially launched, and she was presenting her first major partnership proposal to a room full of potential investors and partners. She was magnificent, confident and articulate, her vision clear and compelling. James watched from the back of the room, careful to maintain professional distance, but his pride was impossible to hide. "Questions?" Bonnie asked after her presentation, meeting each investor's eyes with steady confidence. The questions were tough, but she handled them brilliantly, demonstrating the strategic thinking and market knowledge that had first attracted him to her, professionally. When the meeting ended and people filed out, several investors lingered to discuss next steps. James waited patiently, and when the room finally cleared, Bonnie crossed to him with a smile that was just for him. "You were amazing," he said, keeping his voice low. "They'd be fools not to invest. Fingers crossed, Bonnie said. But even if they don't, there will be other opportunities. That's my girl, James said proudly. What happened to the woman who used to panic before big presentations? She fell in love with someone who taught her that failure isn't fatal and success is sweeter when you've earned it honestly. Bonnie glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned up to kiss him quickly. Thank you for being here. I know you had that investor lunch you cancelled. I wouldn't have missed this for anything, James said simply. Your success matters to me more than mine does. That's not true. It is, he interrupted gently, because your happiness is my happiness. Your wins are my wins. That's what love is, Bonnie. That's what partnership means. She looked at him with shining eyes. How did I get so lucky? We both got lucky, James corrected. We found each other. We were brave enough to take a risk, and we're building something real. That evening, over dinner at their favorite quiet Italian restaurant, James reached across the table to take Bonnie's hand. I have a question for you, he said, his heart pounding. Ask me anything, Bonnie replied, squeezing his fingers. Move in with me. Officially. Not just the nights you stay over, but really move in. Combine our lives completely. Bonnie's breath caught. James, I know it's a big step. I know we said we'd take things slow, but the truth is, every night you're not there feels wrong. Every morning I wake up without you feels incomplete. I want to build a life with you, Bonnie. A real life. Starting with sharing a home. Bonnie was quiet for a long moment, and James felt his heart sink. Then she smiled, that brilliant smile that had first captured his heart. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll move in with you. Yes to building a life together. Yes to all of it. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the restaurant, James knew that taking the risk, choosing love over professional convenience, had been the best decision either of them had ever made. This story explored the journey from professional boundaries to authentic partnership, examining attachment theory, workplace ethics, and the courage required to choose love despite legitimate fears. Notice how Bonnie's willingness to be vulnerable, despite her anxious attachment history around professional credibility, created safety for James to move from emotional avoidance to genuine engagement. The key turning point was her honest admission of love. Psychological research shows that vulnerability begets vulnerability in relationships, creating a positive cycle of emotional openness. The story also illustrated the importance of maintaining ethical boundaries, even while pursuing personal connection. James's decision to recuse himself from professional involvement with Bonnie's company demonstrates that love and integrity can coexist when partners communicate clearly and prioritize transparency. Have you ever had to choose between career advancement and personal happiness? How did you navigate professional boundaries while staying true to your feelings? What helped you find the courage to be honest about what you really wanted? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else facing similar choices. If you've ever loved someone enough to take that terrifying leap of faith and risk everything for a chance at forever, drop a heart in the comments. And if you believe that real love requires both vulnerability and boundaries, that authentic partnership means supporting each other's growth without sacrificing individual ambition, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Here at Mr. Vincent Stories, we explore the psychology of love through narrative fiction, because understanding relationships starts with understanding ourselves and the patterns that shape our connections. Until next time, family, keep believing in authentic love.